Hey, folks, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Larry Perry, and you're tuned in to the Magic Mechanic Radio Show. So you new listeners know this is kind of an interactive automotive and mechanical advice program where we help you with your car problems and just about anything mechanical. And it's been our pleasure to do so for over 31 years. Me personally, I'm an automotive shop owner and been a master auto technician since 1982. And remember, all your calls and your car questions are getting indexed and being placed on our new Magic Mechanic YouTube channel. So other folks searching for answers like yours will be able to get the same needed information. Think about that. Folks will be able to play your car questions back and hear my comments years and years from now. So, they'll probably be making fun of us 100 years from now. You got to figure that. We'll be driving around in Jetson cars, flying from one place to the next. Won't that be a fun I-4 ride, huh? Dash warning lights, poor fuel economy, oil consumption issues, AC not working correctly, vibrations, warranty questions, recall issues, antique, classic car issues, pretty much on any hybrid, electric, or diesel vehicle. Also remember, I have a complete database of all the listed recalls and technical service bulletins from 1980 to 2023. And all you need to do to find out more or get some information about your car is give us a call. Edward, you got a Toyota Corolla. Tell us what's going on with it.
Yeah, 2016 Toyota Corolla. I have it since new, and it's about 45,000 miles on it. I have no trouble. Does it have a fuel filter, and where is it at?
Yeah, Ed, it does have a fuel filter, and this is one of those things we get questioned on quite often on newer vehicles. The fuel filter is actually part of the fuel pump assembly that is inside your gas tank. And
no kidding.
Yeah. And what it does is...
So you have to take the fuel pump out to change the filter.
You certainly would.
No kidding.
But, it's like this. Usually, if your filter becomes restricted on a vehicle like that or on these newer fuel-injected cars, you will have some drivability issues. And when you would take it into a shop, we would do a fuel pressure test and a volume test on your car, and that would show us if there was a restriction in the filter or not. But it's really funny. Some vehicles you'll have filters seem like they'll get restricted on those in-tank filter systems, and then some of them will just about last the life of the vehicle. So you don't really know exactly. But to be honest with you, Ed, there's really not a replacement interval as far as maintenance goes on any of these vehicles for fuel filters. I guess the manufacturers expect you just to drive them until they either plug up or the fuel pump module goes bad, and then it gets replaced at that time. So as far as preventative maintenance, we do have quite a few people that actually have those filters replaced just because they don't want to take any chances. But it's in some cases you got to drop the fuel tank out of the car in order to be able to replace them. So in a case like this, if you're mostly using the car for around town, stuff like that, it probably really wouldn't be worth, too awful much to worry about it, because it would give you somewhat of a warning because of drivability if it was to become restricted. But like I said, I've seen some of them last, pretty much the life of the vehicle. So, as long as they're there and doing their job, I don't think I'd worry too awful much about it. But Ed, we do appreciate your call.
You want to get back right to those phones there, Larry?
Yeah, let's head back over. We lost Jim earlier. Let's start back off with Jim. Jim, sorry we had a little bit of a phone issue there.
That's okay. I was yelling, I can hear you. All right. So I have a 2019 F-150. Runs great. The problem is the tail lights, the right blinker started at fast flash. And I go back there and I check all the bulbs. They're all fine. And I go put it in reverse, and of course there's no backup light on that side. And it's just weird. I looked online, and people say, oh, this is a common problem, and you have to buy, this, analyzer thing or whatever. And I figured, Larry probably knows what the problem is here. The manual doesn't even say anything about bulbs, fuses. They don't even mention turn signals in the whole list of fuses in that manual.
Yeah. Well, everything runs through basically what is referred to as a lighting control module. And that's what supplies, the power and where it goes to in the taillight assembly itself.
Yeah.
But you're saying that is it both taillights or just one?
No, it's just one.
Okay. If you turn on your emergency flashers, do they work?
I haven't checked that.
Your brake lights are working?
Yes, but when I use the brake lights, it's the backup light that comes on the right side.
Jim, I'm going to tell you, this sounds more like something going on in the taillight assembly itself.
Okay.
Yeah. Has the truck been in any kind of an accident in the rear end or anything?
No, but the truck was, the bed was replaced because I bought this truck as a tree had fallen on it. So I bought the truck and had a bunch of stuff replaced. So the taillight's been out and in. And when I looked at it, it seemed like all the wiring looked normal. There was a little bit of tape around the main connection. That looked sort of normal to me. Could be wrong.
Did you physically took the taillight out, right?
Yeah, twice today. I said it's got to be the bulb.
Usually
when you start getting a fast blinker,
those should be LEDs. These aren't going to be. I don't think they're going to be replaceable bulbs in that one. To be honest with you, Jim.
Well, they are. There's three.
Okay, all right. So
they're Sylvanias.
Okay. You didn't see any water or any moisture inside of it?
No, I'm mystified.
Yeah.
The puzzle deepens.
Now, there's no way that somebody could have put the reverse light in the wrong socket, right? I mean,
no, because it's been working fine. I've had the truck for almost a year, and all of a sudden, I get this quick blinker on the right side, and I thought, well, the bulb must be out. So I go back and check everything. It's like, the bulbs are fine. Now, I haven't switched the bulbs from the right side to the left side and vice versa just to see if that could be, but the bulbs look perfectly fine. There's no burn, there's no break in the...
You still wouldn't be illuminating a reverse light. Do you see what I'm saying? That would be, somehow or other, either something is shorted, some wires touching, or either the voltage going to that tail light is, it's getting it to the wrong place, So there's something there. Jim, since the bed has been off of this thing, what I would probably do, because this isn't some crazy problem we run into every day, all right? This, I hit my brakes and my reverse light comes on my, on one of my taillights. Right. Something has to be feeding power to that bulb and socket, incorrectly. And the only way that that's going to happen is if there's something in a lighting control module that is, gotten wet or shorted out, something like that. Or if, and this is a distinct possibility, when they put the bed back on, they may have pinched a wiring harness. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? And when they bolted the bed back down, they may have a wiring harness pinched, and that could be the reason for all of this. That would make 100% perfect sense. So what I think I would do is try to follow the wiring harness, that's running, because you'll have one harness that's running to the back of the truck. And I would get underneath the truck, and I would look up underneath the bed, on up into the cab, where that harness is going to, come out, and then it'll run, along the frame or whatever. But this is one of them cases to where I'm thinking, since it has been whacked with a tree or whatever, and then the bed's been off of it and replaced. I'm thinking that, and since it's not a problem that everybody's got, if it was a problem everybody had, then we would know what the solution was. But in this case here, it being a little bit off the wall, I'm thinking most likely the what makes the most sense would be if they pinched a wiring harness. And who knows? You might get underneath there and find out that somebody has actually cut that wiring harness in two and then spliced it all back together. And now you could be losing a ground or something like that, for that whole entire harness. So let's take a look at that and see what you come up with. If you don't see anything on that, email me, Larry@magicmechanic.com, and what I'll do is, it'll probably be Monday morning before I get a chance to do it, but what I'll do is I'll pull up the wiring schematic for the whole entire rear taillight schematic, and I can look at it and see if there's anything in there that would actually cause that problem, and I can email you back and let you know what I think, where you should go next. Okay.
So there's just one more thing on the truck that you might have run across. Sometimes when I start, I hear this clunk. Sounds like it's coming from the transmission, especially if my left window's down. Doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens, like, whoa, what was that noise? That was a pretty loud noise.
Is it when you're shifting into gear, or?
No, I just crank it up and I hear clunk.
What engine do you have in this?
It's a V8.
Okay, you got a 5.0 motor. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think, does this sound like something in the exhaust? I mean, do you think there's something maybe?
I have heard this noise occasionally when I'm driving. And it just makes me think transmission for some reason. I never have any issues with it shifting smoothly. I've heard some people don't like those 10 speeds, but mine's been fine. But I just hear this. When you hear it, you'll go, "Whoa, that was pretty loud. What was that?"
Same thing, Jim. I don't think it's transmission. You start it up. I mean, your front pump's turning into transmission. I mean, there's nothing really crazy going on there. But just the jolt from starting. You might want to look at all the exhaust hangers coming off the frame that supports the exhaust system. Listen, anything back there is fair game. It's been whacked. It's had the bed off of it and back on. Who knows? See, when you get body shop guys, nothing against body shop guys, but when you get body shop guys starting to do a little bit of mechanical work here and there, a lot of times things don't work out real well. And that's where you'll run into wiring issues, and maybe there's an exhaust hanger that got bent for some reason or other, and they just never got it back in the correct position. But spend some time on a creeper on your back, crawling around under your truck, and let me know what you come up with. And if you don't find anything, we'll see if we can't give you some help on that tail light by looking at the wiring schematic. Have a nice weekend, Jim.
For example, let's head on down to Fort Myers. Arnie's calling in from Fort Myers. Arnie, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, what are you guys doing? Hey, I got this. I bought this Astro van, and I noticed that there is a diode, a little mini diode in the engine fuse box, and my battery kept running down. So I took it out, and now the battery doesn't run down. Is that okay to keep that diode out, Larry?
Well, that's not actually a diode, Arnie. I think what you're talking about is one of the micro relays. Did it just pull out?
Yeah, it's right in the fuse box, engine fuse box. It looks just like a mini fuse, but it's not clear. It's all black, and it has the diode insignia on top of it.
Okay. Yeah, that must be a diode then.
Yes.
All right. See, they'll put those in there. They're one-way diodes. They'll only allow voltage to travel one direction. If they go bad, something can actually pull the voltage out of the out of the battery. So removing it really should have made matters worse if you had a problem with the battery going dead on you. But after you pulled that out, you don't have any battery draw, nothing's pulling the juice out of the battery?
Overnight. And when I had it in there, the battery was losing juice. Now it's out and it's okay. And also I don't have to shut off my daylight running lights anymore. There's a little, sometimes you have to press it, shut your daylight. So I don't even have to do that anymore. So that's kind of nice. But, yeah, other than that, I wonder if it's, nothing else seems to be the problem in the, I couldn't find anything in the Haynes manual.
Yeah. Arnie, now, listen, are you sure that the alternator's charging okay?
Oh yeah, I did. I took a multimeter and I tested everything. Nothing seems to be drawing. It just starts right up, and and it's actually doing like 14 to 15.
Okay,
15 volts,
all right.
yeah.
I know which diode you're talking about. Let me tell you what that diode does. That diode, see what it does is when they've got that in there to prevent you from getting voltage backfeed back in to the fuse and relay center, because what will happen is you'll turn the vehicle off and it'll keep running. You'll shut the vehicle off.
That hasn't happened to me.
Yeah, when you shut the vehicle off, if that diode's not in there, you'll shut the vehicle off and see what would happen is it would, because that just what it's doing is it actually blocking voltage from backfeeding into it from the alternator is what it's doing. See that prevents, because it will keep all the relays excited, and that's why they put that in there. And with it out, if you're not having any problems with it, Arnie, I don't guess I'd tell you to worry about it, but there's something else going on, and most likely what is happening is there's probably something. If you were to take that fuse and relay center apart and literally snap it apart and look inside of it, you're probably going to find something that got cooked in there. Most likely, there's something that's been overheated. Yeah, we have to hunt those things down and replace them all the time over all kinds of issues. Usually battery drains is usually what we wind up replacing them for. But, by pulling that diode out of there, I'm sitting here going, that's kind of a safety feature to keep the alternator from backfeeding back into it after you shut the vehicle off. See, when you turn the vehicle off, the engine's still actually moving a little bit. And when you shut it off, they don't want that alternator's remaining charge going back into that fuse box to keep it excited, because if it does, it'll keep everything else up and running, and you may not even be able to shut the motor off. Because the engine would keep running, and we've seen that happen many a time over those. So in this case here, the only thing I can tell you, Arnie, is if it ain't burning any wires and the alternator's charging and you can shut it off and everything is working, just keep your eyes open.
Yeah, I know it.
Just keep your eyes open. Most likely, from what I've ran into, there's three things that is real common to run a battery down. One of them is an alternator. An alternator has a one-way diode inside of it itself, and that's to prevent it from pulling voltage back out of the battery. Your fuse and relay center. Those micro relays will go bad, and they'll keep pulling voltage out of the battery if they go bad. And then an instrument cluster. Instrument clusters are notorious for causing battery drains like that. So I would say if you pulled that out of that fuse and relay center and the problem seemed to have went away, I'd say on the inside of that, something has probably been overheated at one point, and maybe there's some wires that got melted or something like that. But if it's not causing you any problem, well, as they say in the Star Wars, may the Force be with you, Arnie. We appreciate your call, and good luck. Good luck to you, sir.
Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
So, Larry, I have a 2002 Camry.
Okay.
And I had two codes: the 325, which is the knock sensor one, bank one, and the 430 catalytic system efficiency below threshold.
Okay.
So what happened is, I figured, well, let me just buy the two sensors and ask a mechanic that I know just to replace the sensor and whatever else he finds to replace the sensor. I just gave him the sensor. He didn't even went through troubleshoot or anything, and he literally replaced the sensor without even telling me that he didn't replace the harness. So now I'm getting a 330 and no catalytic problem anymore. What should I do?
So you still got a knock sensor code.
Yes, a 330 now.
Okay. It
moved to the bank too?
Okay. Well, Patrick, a knock sensor code can, it can come up for several different reasons. One of them is if you're not getting a good connection, that could be an issue. A lot of times on these older vehicles, if you replace a knock sensor, it's a good idea to replace the pigtail connector that goes along with it. Yeah. Because the plastic that holds the wires in place, they get so old and brittle that when you plug them back in, a lot of times they'll fall apart, or they'll allow the wire to actually slide up in the connector just because they've been cooked for so long, being hooked to the engine there like that. The other issue is, too, if you've got a knock sensor code, if the engine's making any noise, now it will set a knock sensor code as well. If there's something internal in the engine that is, ticking or knocking or anything like that, it will cause you to set a knock sensor code, so when a knock sensor realizes that there's something inside of an engine that's actually making a little bit of noise, what it'll do is it'll tell the computer system to actually retard the engine timing, because it's trying to prevent it from, blowing the motor up or the engine coming apart. So it'll retard the timing back on the engine, and give you some, a lot less performance out of the motor, all because it's trying to keep from hurting itself, basically. So it's something that, are you getting any noises out of the motor itself?
Fine, except that now it's just, you can't run at high speed because it never goes in overdrive. That's it. But everything else, the car is perfect. And it's one of the things that happened not recently, but before this code, like a few months before, in this V6, there's like a hose that goes in between the V part. That thing broke, and it was leaking all over the place.
Leaking coolant.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. And that was replaced. That was changed. Obviously, I should have done that then, and I should have bought the harness for him. Because I thought he would tell me, hey, I got to change this harness, but I assumed he knew.
Yeah. Listen.
I can go back in there and open it up and change the harness just to see if that will fix it. I mean,
yeah, if the motor's not making any noise, you're probably all right with that. The other thing, too, Patrick, if the vehicle's not going into overdrive like it's supposed to, believe it or not, you might want to check your thermostat. If the thermostat is stuck open, or if the engine's not getting to the correct temperature on that vehicle, it will not go into overdrive until it does. And so if the engine temperature is too low because of a bad thermostat, or let's just say somebody took the thermostat out of the engine, those are reasons why it would not go into overdrive. So if everything else in the transmission is working correctly, it's just not going into overdrive, torque converter lockup type of situation, you may want to just try putting a new thermostat in it. That could correct that problem.
You just told me something. My daughter just told me. This is my daughter's car. It's not overheating, but the temperature gauge is going just a little bit above what she's normally seen it.
Okay.
So yeah. You may have a good point. I'll replace the thermostat before I replace the other one.
Yeah, give that a shot. And we wish you luck, Patrick. Thank you so much for your call, buddy.
Go ahead, Ron.
Hey, Larry.
Hey, Ron.
Have an interesting issue. It's got a 2003 Camry. It's got the 4-cylinder. She's got 200,000 on her. Generally runs like a charm. However, recently she started to become hard to start. It starts, but it takes longer than normal. Also, and the main thing is the idle is inconsistent. It'll idle at 200. It'll idle at 750 where it should be, 500. Sometimes it won't idle at all. And I personally think the two problems are related. Now, I was told by someone that there's an idle control motor or idle air control motor as part of a throttle bar, and that would be my problem. So I'm looking for somebody that I know has more experience in this myself.
Yeah, Ron, I'm going to tell you, I don't know that these two problems would be related, and let me tell you why. The excessive cranking to get the vehicle started, well, I'm going to tell you like this. There's two things that usually cause a vehicle to have extended cranks. One of them is, and we just recently ran into this with an older Toyota, and what would happen is we would go to crank it, and for the first little bit of cranking, we were getting absolutely no injector pulse whatsoever. But the cam and crank sensor was working correctly, telling the computer that we needed, spark and injector pulse. So that was a rare one. It was definitely a computer causing the issue. We just weren't getting an injector pulse to operate the injectors. The other thing that we run into is if there's a problem with the fuel pump inside the gas tank. And let me explain. You could once you get the vehicle started, you could drive it from here to China and back, and you wouldn't have a problem with it. But what will happen is these fuel pumps in these vehicles have a one-way check valve in them. And what happens is if that one-way check valve starts leaking fuel back out of the fuel system when the vehicle sets, you'll go and you'll turn the key to the on position, which activates the fuel pump for about a 2 to 3 second prime run. And then the fuel pump shuts off, and it won't start back up until the engine starts. So what happens is if you get a one-way check valve in the fuel pump that's leaking residual fuel pressure off and back into the fuel tank, then you turn the key to the on position. That's not enough run time to repressurize and chase all the air out of your fuel system. So when you go to crank it, you've got air in that system, and it takes a little while to chase it out of there. So cycling the key 2 or 3 times usually will do it, and then it'll go ahead and crank and start back up without any problem. But as far as these idle issues go, I think that is you could have a computer problem, but usually if you get an idle control issue like that, it will usually set a code, and that'll usually be a code for, see, the computer will command the idle speed control motor to do one thing, and if it's not adjusting the idle like it's supposed to, it will set a code for that. Ron, do you have a check engine light on?
Yeah, I have no codes that I can read, meaning there's no hidden codes that I'm not available to me, and no check engine light. The fuel pump issue, I know what you're talking about there, and it doesn't matter hot or cold. I can turn it off and turn it right back on, and it still takes, instead of a second or two, it takes about 2.5, 3 seconds.
Well, if that one-way check valve is leaking, it can do it hot or cold. Let's do this, Ron. The next time you go to start it up, turn the key to the on position and off. On position and off. Do that. Cycle that key 3 or 4 times before you crank it, and see if it starts up at that point. If it does, I'm going to suggest you have a residual fuel pressure test done on it, and at least that's going to give us a clue of where we should go next. truck and shipped directly to that shop. It's going to be replaced. Not one dime, not even the oil and filter is going to be charged to you. That is how their warranty works. It's an incredible warranty, and that's why we sell the Jaspers. For more information on Jasper engines and the updates they do to the motors or transmissions, go to jasperengines.com. And last but not least, our place, the Magic Mechanic Auto Service Center. It's located here in Orlando, Florida. Engines, transmissions, brakes, suspension, steering, electrical repairs, and of course, Amsoil synthetic lubricants. You can visit us at magicmechanic.com. Email me your car questions directly, larry@magicmechanic.com. Looks like we have got an entire full bank of calls. It's a good thing I was a little long-winded there because Josh has been busy. So we're going. You're probably panting. How does this happen? You must have fixed the phone lines or something. Let's head to Andy here in Winter Springs. Got a 2018 Subaru Outback. Andy, tell us what's going on.
Nothing really, Larry. I just could have swore I heard you mention a couple weeks ago not to use 20 weight oil, but use 30. And I looked in my manual, and it does say 5W20. So I'm getting ready to do an oil change, and it reminded me of that. And I just wonder if I heard you right.
Yes, you did. Andy, there's not one engine that is suitable to put a 20 weight in here in Central Florida. I'm going to tell you a quick story here, and this will kind of reiterate why I have been preaching don't use 20 weights in Central Florida for so many years. You know, anybody that knows anything about a car or anything like that knows that Hyundai and Kia, they can't replace that. They've got to recall just about every engine that they've ever put in a car. I mean, their service departments don't do anything but just engine replacements. That's all they do. It's just because the engines are coming apart. You see them on the side of the road on fire because they sling rods out of the engine and sets the exhaust system on fire. All this happens because, and the excessive wear, the oil consumption problems, and I could go on and on and on. It was all because of 20 weight oils. And it's not like anybody who's listened to this program. I have said this so many times, and I try to get people to understand. The 20 weights are so thin, you can't really keep parts separated. And they accelerate engine wear, piston rings, cylinder walls, rod bearings. It just eats everything up. There's not enough viscosity, meaning the thickness of the oil once it's at normal operating temperature. And so what winds up happening is these oils just literally eat the engine alive. And then all of a sudden you've got oil consumption. You can't keep oil in the car, and it goes on and on and on. Well, with Hyundai and Kia, this is something that I was really, on the new stuff, on their newer vehicles, they are back to recommending 30-weight oil. Can you imagine that? See, the manufacturers, when they EPA these cars, they want to run the thinnest oil they can possibly run in them so that they can prove they get the maximum fuel economy. That to them is more of a sales type of aid. Well, our car gets this many miles to the gallon. Well, they use these ultra thin oils to prove miles per gallon, and it also actually helps a little bit as far as the exhaust emissions. So they have to pass all the federal exhaust emissions testing. So these real thin oils are great for that. But they're lousy for keeping an engine around any length of time because these thin oils represent less oil pump drag. And that's the only benefit. And it benefits everybody but you. The engines just wear themselves out. Just not enough lubrication there to keep parts separated. And we're in the worst case scenario because we're in Central Florida. You get back on 105-degree temperatures out here, and you get an engine temperature up to way over 200, and listen, oil is only going to do so much. And if you don't run something like an Amsoil synthetic and a 30 weight, I like the 0W30 Signature Series Amsoil to replace these 20 weight recommendations. If you do that, the difference is probably 150,000, 200,000 miles that you will be getting service out of your vehicle as opposed to not. So definitely something to consider, and stay away from the 20-weight oils. That stuff, it's not good for a bicycle chain.
Let's head on over to Winter Park, where Brad's got a question for Larry. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. I have a 2018 F-150, and from the get-go, it was, when it was leaking coolant, it was a catalytic converter issue, I understand. Apparently, they replaced it, but then a year later, I had to bring it back in, and they said, okay, it's something to do with the catalytic converter, and Ford has a nationwide shortage on this part, something associated with that. And I asked him, okay, so is it safe for me to drive all this time? He says, yeah, your gas mileage will be very poor. But it's been another year now, and you're telling me Ford can't get these parts out, or I'll just keep driving it. I mean, the vehicle's under warranty. I bought the extended warranty, so.
Hey, Brad, let me ask you this. Are you talking about the torque converter in the transmission, or are you talking about the catalytic converter on the exhaust system?
I think it's that one, the exhaust system, because my check engine light has been on all this time, and he told me the part has been ordered, and Ford has a backlog on these. Initially, I was leaking coolant, and when I had brought it into the Magic Mechanic almost 2 years ago, they told me about it, and of course, I took it right away to the dealer, and they fixed whatever they needed to at the time, but then a year later, I brought it back in, and I said, the check engine line came back on, and sure enough, he says, we have to order you a new part, and it's on back order nationwide from Ford. And, of course, my fuel mileage is bad because of this.
What engine do you have, Brad?
Oh, I have the 2.7, the EcoBoost. I don't do any towing or anything, so it's a nice little engine if you don't do any towing.
Yeah. So have they already replaced one catalytic converter on the vehicle?
Well, they fixed the issue when I was leaking coolant, because when I had brought it in for my AMSOIL oil change about 2 years ago, your guys noticed it right away. They said I was out of coolant.
Yeah.
So they suggested I took it right into the dealer, and I did. Whatever that issue was, they fixed it.
Okay.
Engine light comes back on, and sure enough, it has to do with the catalytic converter, and he tells me that it's on back order because of COVID or whatever.
Yeah. Well, Brad, we are running into that a lot with a lot of different things. Everything has been a battle to get parts here. I mean, it really, really has. So I wouldn't doubt that. The situation is, that converter is available in the aftermarket. If Ford itself does not make it or can't get it, which we run into that quite often. Walker or somebody like that usually has the converters available for it. And on yours, it would depend on whether it was the upstream or the downstream converter that was actually giving you a problem. But you might want to mention that to them. Would your extended warranty cover an aftermarket catalytic converter? It should, as long as you're willing to go with a non-Ford part. That way, you get your vehicle fixed, get the check engine light off, and get your fuel economy back up. Maybe throw that at them and see what they say. And also, depending on the extended warranty that you have, you may want to call the Magic Mechanic and ask JD if it's an extended warranty that we take. And that might solve your whole entire problem. Let's hit the open mics.
All right, this one comes to us from a very pleasant gentleman.
Hey, Larry, John from Merritt Island. I just have a quick question that's always confused me. How do you determine fuel and oil ratios on a two-cycle engine if there's no other information out there available for it? What does 50 to 1 actually mean in the real world, or 40 to 1 in the real world? I appreciate it.
Oh, geez. Don't make me do math. All right. I think for 5 gallons, now this is what I've always mixed, and this is 50 to 1. With AMSOIL, I don't use any other two-stroke oil. I really need to mention this. This is something I think a lot of folks might benefit from. A few of us still use two-stroke stuff. And if you run the AMSOIL two-stroke oil in any engine it will last indefinitely. It'll never wear out. And I'm not kidding. You can't wear it out. It's impossible to wear it out. And let me explain why. Number one, it being made from a polyalpha olefin, which is irradiated plastics, basically, and ester synthetic. What happens is, on a two-stroke engine, the oil is actually mixed with the gas. So you've got an engine that's getting brand new, not recycled, brand new oil every time it sucks gas and oil into the cylinder. So, you're getting the best. Now, what causes a two-stroke engine to fail is a loss of compression. And everybody says, well, how does it lose compression? It loses compression because of carbon that is left behind from the lousy two-stroke oil that you're using. That's how you develop the carbon to score the cylinders and cause them to lose compression. So technically, you're getting brand new oil every stroke. Well, if you can eliminate the carbon issue that will score a cylinder and cause the compression loss, well, the engine will run forever. And that's what you accomplish when you run the AMSOIL two-stroke oil, whether it be in an outboard engine or whether it be in lawn equipment. No matter what, it will actually it will literally run indefinitely. You can't wear them out. You may have to replace a carburetor and spark plugs and all the other stuff, but you'll never wear that motor out because you're not going to develop carbon, because AMSOIL is impossible to turn to carbon. You're not going to turn it to carbon, not only in their two-stroke, but you're not going to turn it into carbon inside of an internal combustion engine, a four-stroke engine like in your car either. So, it's just it's a fountain of youth, not only for your automobile, for any two-stroke as well. My deal is I have a rule of thumb. I use the AMSOIL 100 to 1 premix, but I run it 50 to 1 in my two-stroke applications. And the science behind my math is 13.5 ounces in 5 gallons. And now you can cut that in half and do it for the 6 gallons, but 13.5 ounces of the AMSOIL 100 to 1 two-stroke mixed 50 to 1 is in 5 gallons, 13.5 ounces. And that'll put you right where you need to be. And actually, it's a little bit on the heavy side, as far as the oil goes itself. But it'll work perfect, and you'll have maximum engine protection. And like I said, it'll last forever. But you got to use the AMSOIL. Don't use this stuff that you're going to buy at your local hardware store unless it says AMSOIL on it. But I think a lot of your Ace Hardware sell the AMSOIL two-stroke as well. So good luck with that.
All right, the next open mic was a nice guy who called in earlier but didn't think he could hang on too long. He took advantage of the open mic segment of the show. Here is his question.
Hi, Larry. I have a 99 Chevy Astro van with rear air conditioning. The rear blower fan speed switch burns up when you use it on high. It does better on low, but it definitely burns up on high. I've changed the motor. I've checked the grounds at the motor. Just wondering what else to look for. I've gone to the junkyard and pulled parts. Apparently, this is very common across the board.
This is a nice time to remind everybody that there is a time limit on the Open Mics app. You got to get out your question in 30 seconds or less. Do you need me to play it again, Larry? You kind of got the gist of his question.
No. Well, you said you've been to the junkyard many times. I mean, I don't know whether you're using a rebuilt or a new replacement blower motor. It's kind of like this. If you're putting a new or rebuilt blower motor in there and it's burning itself up on high, that is extremely rare because, see, when you run them on high, that is a direct 12 volts. Anything less than high, you're actually running reduced voltage to it, which would actually make the motor run hotter. Now, if there's any venting into that rear AC system, you need to inspect that, because if the motor itself isn't getting enough air to cool itself down with, then of course you're liable to wind up with a problem there. It's liable to just burn itself up. But if you're using a good part, like I said, on high, that should be when that motor actually runs its coolest. Just make sure that there is open venting going to that motor itself. It has to have air going through that motor to actually cool it, let alone it moving air. It's got to have air itself to cool it down as well. Make sure that it's getting plenty of air supply, and make sure if there's any vents that are blocked or anything like that to make sure they're open, because if not, you'll continue the process. I hope that helps you. Just make sure that the motor's vented as well. So just give that a shot and let me know what happens.
And our final open mic comes to us from a familiar voice. And let me push the button right so we can all hear the friendly voice. Here we go.
Hey, Larry, Bubba the Welder here, checking you out. As always, very good show. Howdy do, Josh. Free 99, are ya out of your mind? Right on the money, son. Check y'all later. Carry on.
Okay, that was our friend Bubba the Welder. Nice to hear from you, Bubba, and we're glad you're listening.
Thank you much, Bubba. That wraps it up for the open mic. Say we head back to the phone world, Larry. Sound good to you?
Well, I'm gonna read one of our emails that we've gotten.
Oh, certainly.
I hope he's listening. He's got a headlights are on a 2004 F-150 Ford Lariat. It says the parking lights, the tail lights, the flood, what he calls them floodlights, brake lights, turn signals, emergency flashers all work. No high or low beam headlights. Said he's checked all the related fuses and relays and said they were all good. Replaced turn signal switch, which he means multi-function switch. He says as had a problem changing from high to low beams. So prior to the lights not working, and he's now I guess he's scratching his head. Well, on this vehicle for the headlights, a lot of folks don't realize it has an extra fuse block, per se, in the right-hand kick panel, in the passenger side. There's a relay, a high beam relay that both low and high beam run through, and there's also a 25-amp fuse in there. Now, if you don't have either one of them and you've got power at the headlight switch, then you need to pull that kick panel down and check those in there. A lot of folks don't realize that there's an extra fuse box over there in that right-hand kick panel. So I hope that does help you there and get your headlights back up and working.
Say that again?
I said I hope that gets his headlights up and working.
I bet it does. Expert advice from an expert in the automotive field. Let's head back to the phones where Alex has a question about a generator. It is hurricane season, so it's something we all may have questions on. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, yes, sir. I bought a generator several years ago, about 7 years ago. Thank God I never had a chance to use it because we haven't had a hurricane. But it's still in the box, and I'm wondering, should I have started that thing and put oil in it and make sure it worked, or should I be confident that it's going to work next time I need it? Because, I didn't want to put oil in it and then have to worry about changing the oil because it's been sitting for a while. What's your recommendation?
You know what, Alex, I probably would not worry about it. I'd just leave it in its box. Most of those generators have never been started, but what they do is they actually put a little bit of stable fuel stabilizer in the fuel tank for shipping purposes, and so if they set for a long time, on a shipping dock or something like that, if they were to get a little moisture in the fuel tank or whatever, it's not going to cause anything to rust up. So most likely it's had a little stabilizer in that fuel tank whenever it was built. I've seen very few that did not come with some type of stabilizer in them. And if that's the case, which I'm sure it probably is, and besides, now at this point, your best bet is if you know that we're going to get hit, and you know that there's probably going to be a good chance that we're going to be without electricity, you probably want to go ahead and get it out of the box and just make sure that you got it up and running before you have some bad weather hit us. I think that would be my best advice to you. Otherwise, just leave it in the box. It's not, if it ain't hurting anything, just leave it in there. But like I said, chances are it came with stable in it. Now, for other folks out there like myself, fortunately for me, I do have a standby generator here at this hacienda, and it runs off of the propane. We have a huge propane tank that's underground, and we get it filled ever so often, and it runs several gas appliances. And if we lose electricity, it automatically kicks on. Most of the time, I wouldn't even know that we lost electric unless I was on the computer, because it has to power back up. But so I don't have to worry about that one. But I do have another one, because I'm prepared for Armageddon. So if the standby goes bad, I've got another one out in the garage I can hook up. But now that one has had fuel standing in it for probably 4 or 5 years. Now what I'm going to do is, and because this thing has set for so long, I'm going to go ahead and order a carburetor for this, and I'm going to have it literally wire tied to the generator. So if I wind up needing a carburetor, I have it in hand, and I'm not going to have to worry about it a day before a hurricane gets here. Now listen, these carburetors for these generators, we're talking dollars. Most of them are less than $10, and not to have an extra one, and that's the only thing that'll leave you stranded with a generator is the stupid carburetor. I wouldn't even bother getting a rebuild kit for these things because the carburetors are so stinking cheap. You're better off if you've got one and the generator's been sitting around for quite a few years, and you're like me, it's got gas in it. Buy a carburetor. I mean, it's only a few dollars. Just order it online, and my goodness, you probably get it off of eBay or Amazon. And just have it there. It's just well worth doing that. And another thing too, if they've been sitting a long time, probably be a good idea to order you an air filter. Now, some of them have those foam filters in them, and if that foam filter has been sitting for, well, like in Alex's case, 7 years, it's probably fallen apart, so you probably need to replace that too. But make sure you got a carburetor on hand, especially for one that's been sitting a long period of time. They're cheap, may as well. Just good insurance.
Geneva, where Steven's got a question about his 86 Mustang. Go ahead, Steven.
Hey, I got a 1986 Mustang GT. It's all original, 23,000 miles on it. I'm having a real problem with the idle. It'll work fine for a certain amount of time, and then it'll just start rough idling. And I've replaced everything from the fuel tank all the way up to the rack.
Okay. Hey, listen, Stephen, have you, what about the EGR valve?
I replaced it.
You replaced it? Because those have those would get carbon underneath of them, and it would hold open, and it would create an idling issue. See, this is where you run into a challenge. On this vehicle, Stephen, there is no data stream you can look at on a scan tool or anything like that. So it's just whether the car gives you a code or not, and everything is hands-on tested, hands-on checking, and they can be some of the most frustrating, whether it be on a Mustang or a pickup truck or anything that vintage. It can be extremely challenging. My heart goes out to you. There's only so much you can check. You can check fuel pressure, and then other than that, listen, may the force be with you, as they say, because you're going to have to test everything on that vehicle by hand. And then once you replace everything and you still got issues, that's when you really start scratching your head. Map sensor is very, very common to go bad on those. I'm sure you've replaced it and probably 3 other ones just like it. Just hopefully you're dealing with some decent parts that you're rounding up for it. But buddy, my heart goes out to you. It's not going to be an easy one. Like I said, anybody can throw parts at it. That's what you've been doing, but that's almost what you have to do with that one, unless you want to sit there with a breakout box and go through every little tiny wire, every part, testing it one way and up downside to Sunday. But it's a very challenging car to work on. I wish you the luck, buddy.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That might just have wrapped up today's show. We got about 15 seconds. So
well,
I'm not
Stu,
sure
Laura, just email me. Laura, I need to help you with this one. I think you got a steering rack going bad. Stu, that oil pressure gauge bouncing up and down, those were notorious for gauge problems. And we actually would put new gauges in those instrument clusters. But email me, Larry@magicmechanic.com. Folks, thanks for tuning in. You listeners, customers, show sponsors, the reason we do the show and have a job. If you can tune in every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time here in Central Florida, 107.3 FM, HD Radio 96.52, and AM 580. Worldwide at WDBO.com. And click Listen Live or just tell your smart speaker to play WDBO Radio every Saturday at 3 p.m. Hey, if you need help with your vehicle right now, you can always call Magic Mechanic at 407-629-2661. Visit our website, magicmechanic.com, or you can also email your car questions directly to me, Larry@magicmechanic.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube Magic Mechanic channel, and until next week, be safe in and out of your car, and we'll see you back here next Saturday at 3.